Alright, so it's been a while since I started a video with one of these fake video essay intro type things, but I actually think it's really important to lend some context to today's proceedings to show you one of the most busted cards in the early days of Magic. Ladies and gentlemen, feast your eyes upon Control Magic. Now this is a card that struck fear in the heart of every 90s Magic player that wasn't on blue, and some of you that played back then are probably hyperventilating from the mere sight of the thing because this card made Control super annoying to play against. Even more annoying than it is to play against now, if you can imagine that, because once you finally got to send your Vampire or Shivan Dragon down against their barrage of counterspells, well, they'd untap next turn, and you'd immediately realize why they let you have said Shivan Dragon, and then you'd quit playing Magic forever, but none of us quit playing Magic forever, so you're back, and you want to check out some decks. Well, sorry to do it to you, but it turns out that Wizards has continued this trend of thievery for the last 25 years or so now, and even though there hasn't been anything quite as bad as Control Magic, there were some mistakes along the way. This was actually worse than Control Magic. Treachery's a dumb card. There were some cards that weren't as good as we maybe thought they were going to be, and then there's some cards that were But despite the fact that that last terrible card is brand new, Wizards has been printing a bunch of really good thief stuff in blue and black over the last few sets. So can we actually make this a real deck with competitive importance? I think that we actually can, given the rest of the pieces that we have in this color combination. So today, blue-black thievery. What's up, my woozers? It's Dev from Mtg. We like it, a Magic, and I'm Ziggy Love. He's been real sweet lately since we got the kitten in the house, and I think it's because he knows he's got competition, and he's not the baby anymore. But that's alright, I still love you, bud. The whole internet still loves you, buddy. But in any event, today I'm going to show you a deck that's almost as near and dear to my heart as Ziggy here. Not quite, but it's getting there because I've been working on this thing for a good long time. It keeps coming in like second in Patreon polls. It actually tied this time. It had to win a coin flip to get me to show it to you, but I finally get to show Blue Black Thief to you, and I actually think this deck has legs. Now we're going to start by playing 4 whole copies in the main deck of a popular sideboard card these days, and that's Entrancing Melody. And why not play a playset of this card right now? We just saw the day 1 breakdown from the Pro Tour. Yes, I called it the Pro Tour. And big surprise, the most played deck at the tournament is Sultai. And against Sultai, this is just a Control Magic. For 4 mana, you can pick up a Wild Growth Walker no matter how big it gets. You can pick up a Hydroid Krasis for 4 mana no matter how big it gets. So just a number of high-profile targets against that deck, but it even works pretty well sometimes against decks like Mono Blue Aggro, where you can pick up a Tempest Gen for 5, or you can pick up a Terramander for 3 mana, and maybe it's already got a Curious Obsession on it that'll come along with it. So this is actually pretty decent against some of the best decks in the format right now, and it gets cited in all the time anyway. Why not play it in the main deck? And by the way, the melody that's so entrancing is, for my money, Wannabe by the Spice Girls. I don't know why, but every time I play this card, I'm like, if you wanna be my lover, you gotta get with my friends, bring it over to my side of the table. I don't know why I do that, but maybe you will now too. But the hits just keep on coming. We got a lot more really good like Thief cards in that in Standard right now. You know, usually I like to build decks that take no prisoners, but this time I'm going to play 4 copies of Hostage Taker. I'm going to work a pun in here or there for you. Now, this is insane against Hydroid Krasis, if you haven't heard yet. It's actually gone through a process over the last month or so where it started creeping into sideboards, and now it's creeping into main decks is like 2 of, but screw it. We're just playing the entire playset to stay on theme here, but it's not like it's a bad card. Again, if you steal your opponent's Krasis with this, you get to play it with whatever value for X you can muster up, so that's pretty sweet. Getting to play Hydroid Krasis without having to drop $40 on it or whatever it's up to now. That's nice. But if your opponent kills your Hostage Taker before you can actually play the Krasis you stole, that's fine. They get their Krasis back as a 0/0 and it just dies on the spot. Also extremely worth noting, by the way, this beats Spell Pierce in the Mono Blue Aggro matchup. One less counterspell to worry about. It's actually a pretty big game against them. And it beats Negate post-board against almost everything. You know, Sultai Krasis is going to board into gates, but you kind of don't care. You got Hostage Takers. So this is actually a pretty good metagame call right now, and it gives you a 2/3. In the meantime, while you're waiting to play your guy, you also get a body on the board. Nothing wrong with that. Just watch out for Liam Neeson. But anyway, we're also playing 4 copies of Thief of Sanity, the OG Phantom Thief. I think of Persona 5 every time I play this card now, but this isn't necessarily stealing stuff from the board, but it's still stealing stuff from our opponent's library. You know, we can pickpocket something from the top 3 when this actually does go through, and that's really, really nice. You know, a lot of these cards, like Entrancing Melody, Hostage Taker, they just focus on like snagging creatures, but not every deck plays creatures, you know, so it's nice to have a card like Thief of Sanity that's actually good against control decks. Same thing with the Eldest Reborn. This is, you know, another sort of anti-control card that some people board in against slower matchups like Sultai and Esper. And definitely see why. It's a way of taking out Planeswalkers and then effectively stealing them. So this is kind of on theme. You can rob a grave with this, and that's pretty sweet when there's a fairy in there, or a Vivian Reed or something, or even just a big creature, whatever, you know. But in the meantime, it's a 3-for-1. A rolling 3-for-1 that takes a couple of turns, but it still is. You know, sometimes you don't want that guy. You can force your opponent into situations where you're like, turn 4 Hostage Taker, take your best guy, and then turn 5 Eldest Reborn, sacrifice the other guy, you know? And then you'll get that guy in a couple of turns and let the discard in the meantime too. So this thing does 3 really distinct things. It's really good against both mid-range and control decks, and again, it just gives us another wrinkle while allowing us to stay on theme. But we're playing one more creature in the deck, and it actually doesn't steal cards off the top of their library or creatures off their side of the battlefield, but it does steal games, and that's Terramander. You know, all 4 copies of this thing. I was looking to increase the threat density a little bit, and I think that Terramander is the best way of doing that. We've actually got a little over 20 instants and sorceries in this deck that can fill our graveyard, so it's not actually super hard to adapt a Terramander and, you know, turn a game around, close a game out. If you haven't been able to steal important creatures, or if you're playing against a deck that doesn't have a whole lot of creatures, Terramander is actually a pretty good way of just finishing things. In my time kind of messing around with this deck, I ended up stealing many a Terramander from other players. You know, it's Drake's Mono Blue Tempo. You get a Terramander from time to time, and first of all, I should have said this with Entrancing Melody, but even if they've adapted their Terramander, you still steal it for 3 mana. So you get a 5/5 for effectively 3 mana. And when it's not adapted and you steal it for 3 mana, there were a lot of times where I could adapt it just the next turn for like 3 or 4 mana, and I was like, man, this card should just be in the deck. So that's exactly what we did. It is. But I'm actually not quite done stealing stuff here, because we're also playing 4 copies of Thought Erasure in the deck. You knew it was coming, because this has been one of my favorite cards all season, and I keep like pimping how good it is, and I'm not going to stop. This is yet another ridiculous tool against like Sultai Krasis and Esper Control. It gives us another good tool against the control decks in the format to actually give us a fighting chance in game 1. Plus, it's not half bad against Mono Blue Tempo decks either. Get those counter spells out of their hand and stuff. So actually, Thought Erasure is a nutso card right now, and it's not stealing, like we don't get the card, but we at least get to take the card out of their hand, put it in their graveyard, and not have to worry about it. That's great for all kinds of cards right now, but there's actually another layer to this card, and that is that it gives us a lot of information. On turn 2, we can Thought Erasure them, get the most important card out of their hand, yeah, but also plan out what we're hoping to steal a little bit later on in the game. So information actually means an awful lot to a deck like this. And the Surveil ain't half bad either. We're actually flexing Surveil on a few cards in this deck, like Discovery Dispersal. We're playing this as well. First of all, we can't steal Carnage Tyrant, so it's nice to have a couple of things in the deck that can get rid of a Carnage Tyrant. Eldest Reborn can do it, and so can Dispersal, but we're actually casting Discovery a lot of the time. We don't have a whole lot of turn 2 plays. We've got enough. You know, we got enough to fill out our curve, but this is one of the better turn 2 plays we can make. If we haven't gotten to a Thievery card we really need to get to, this will help us get there. This also will help us, you know, get the land drops we need or blast through lands we don't need. Surveil is a really, really good ability, and I shouldn't have to tell you that. A turn 2 Discovery can also make sure that we get a Sinister Sabotage in time for turn 3. We're doing a lot of surveilling in this deck, but we kind of need to, you know, against control, we do kind of want to surveil past these Entrancing Melodies and Hostage Takers that don't make that much of a difference in those matchups. So sometimes Surveil will be our best friend, but obviously a hard counter is really nice to have too. If we don't get Thief of Sanity on turn 3, it's entirely likely our mana is going to be up anyway, so we really don't mind holding up 3 for a Sinister Sabotage. This allows us to take out stuff that's not necessarily creatures. Again, most of our Thief cards take care of creatures, but something like this is a little bit of game against everything. And don't be cheeky, comment lads. I know it doesn't counter Carnage Tyrant and other stuff that can't be countered. I know that everything isn't the word that applies here, but darn near everything this card counters, and it's really important to have a hard counter in this deck to take out stuff like, you know, Reclamation and other important non-creatures that we might not want to have to see on the other side of the field. Now, we are playing a little bit of removal in this deck. Aggro is actually, almost ironically, one of our worst matchups. You know, most of our sideboard is dedicated to the control matchup, because Esper is our actual worst matchup, but we could do better against really fast aggro. It turns out that even if we steal a creature return, which pretty much isn't going to happen, we're still going to lose against those decks. So we have to have some removal, especially for the early game, to make sure we don't get run over. For those instances, Moment of Craving is obviously a really good card. This will take out most of the creatures in mono blue aggro in the early game, as well as blue-white aggro, which are kind of the two decks that we're most worried about running us over. But this also has plenty of game against mono red aggro, obviously, and the couple of life you gain back is a huge cushion for what it's worth. So at least the 3 copies of Moment of Craving, but I'm also playing a copy of Cast Down to take out those random Doom Whisperers, Crackling Drakes, and Wild Growth Walkers that we might not be able to steal. But we'll finish the deck off with what I admit is probably the most flexible slot in the list, and that's Chemist's Insight. But I do want to give you some insight as to why I ended up on this card. I don't want to play too many copies of it, but we do need some actual card advantage in this deck. If we're starting to run low, I like something other than Discovery Dispersal. You know, I just don't want something that only replaces itself. I want to actually pick up card advantage from playing a draw cards spell. And Chemist's Insight is one of the best cards at doing that. It also gives us something that we can sort of guilt-free surveil into the yard. And with 11 different main deck cards that surveil, I like to have something that's sort of low pressure. You know, I can throw this in my yard and still cast it later. It's not a big deal. So I went in the deck for that reason. And we're also kind of trying to fill out the 4-drop slot here. There are other ways of doing that. I considered Ritual of Soot. I considered Karn. But in the end, I think this is not necessarily the absolute best choice. I think that's really up for debate. But it's the favorite choice that I tried. Now here's your lands right here. We're playing 24 of them, which might seem a land too low, but we are surveilling a lot, and that really, really helps to keep the land count right. And we got Chemist's Insight, we got Discovery in the deck to draw more lands if we absolutely need to. So I think we're okay on 24, even if we do want to do some kind of expensive stuff, like Entrancing Melody for 6 some of the time. We still got the lands to do it, and we've got the colored sources to do everything we need to do as well. We've got 20 blue sources in this deck. That'll make sure that we get to Sinister Sabotage and the Mass Manipulation we'll talk about in just a second. And we've still got 14 black sources in the deck. Not too shabby. Should help us get to Cast Down, Moment of Craving on turn 2, and Thought Erasure for that matter. But here is your sideboard right here. And like I said, most of this is anti-control tech, but you do see the Ritual of Soot. It made it into the 75, and this could honestly be Cry the Carnarium, but I'm not convinced that we're going to even have 2 black mana by turn 3 in most games with only 14 black sources. You really want like 18 for that? And I don't think that that's where we want to be. So Ritual of Soot, we'll wait an extra turn, we'll cast it on 4, and it'll also pick up anything that Cry of the Carnarium can't pick up. You know, this takes care of pretty much everything in Sultai, and I think that's big enough right now too. But it'll also take out Tempest Gens and stuff like that against mono blue aggro, and that is invaluable. There's also the Mass Manipulation, which is basically in there to stay on theme. I'm not actually sure that we need this card, but I'd feel really bad if we didn't play it. And it is good to have against Planeswalkers and such. But just about everything is straight up anti-control tech. We've got 4 Duress, 4 Negates, sort of the baby starter kit for beating Esper right now. But also, these 8 cards are very, very good against Mono Blue Tempo, a deck I keep bringing up because it's insanely important. And I want that to hammer that into your head. Mono Blue Tempo is a super dangerous deck right now, and it helps to have pieces against it. Aside from that, we've also got Nizahal Primal Tide against mainline Esper decks. This will not come in against Tempo, but it'll come in every game against Esper. I like Nizahal in here. It's my anti-control finisher of choice, but the card that you're probably bugging your eyes out at is Disinformation Campaign. Now, this makes this kind of a transformational sideboard. You know, we're going to mostly be boarding out Entrancing Melodies, Hostage Takers, and stuff like that in Game 2, and we have to have stuff to board in. We'll just become a Disinformation Campaign deck against control decks and hope to get all the card advantage we could ever need off of Campaign while winning off of Thief of Sanity, Terramander, and the Eldest Reborn. It's actually not a bad plan. Disinformation Campaign almost was a real deck last season. It kept 5-0ing on MTGO, and it's still not bad this season either. But here are your rankings of power right here. Final score of Nintendo 65. Actually, really not a bad score for how I won't say cheap this deck is, but it's not a expensive deck either. This thing is about $150 on TCG Player right now. You could actually build this deck for way cheaper than it's been presented here just by, fudging around with the lands. But we actually do a lot right in this particular meta. And I know that when we say the meta, we mean sort of different things depending on who we're talking to. And I want to do a whole video addressing that. But when I say the meta, I mean looking at, the 16 plus different decks that have been registered for the Pro Tour this weekend. We actually have good game against a fair amount of that field. And we're, it's very much a rogue deck. This is a brew. This is not something super popular. But I still think that this deck has real game. I've beaten Sultai an awful lot in testing this deck. Now, if you hadn't noticed, this is kind of just a Dimir control deck in some ways, A tap-out control deck in the late game because we're playing Hostage Taker, Entrancing Melody, yeah. But at the same time, in the early turns, you're just casting little small ball removal spells, Sinister Sabotage, Thought Erasure, just like a big boy Dimir control deck is doing. So there's not actually that much difference. We just have a different endgame than those decks do. So again, let me know how you felt about all this jank down there in the comments section. Again, I've been having some success with this thing. And if you wanted to try it out and you need some pieces for it, just click the first link in the description. I got you, kid, down there. That'll take you to TCG Player. They sponsor my content, and they're where you're going to get this deck for the lowest prices on the whole internet. I can say that to you truthfully. So hit the link in the description down there and go over to Tcog Player and get anything that you might need. Plus, other YouTube stuff you can do includes hitting the like button. That just takes like less than a second of your day. Helps my metrics out tremendously. So put me in more recommended feeds. Hit the like button. Subscribe if you're new. If you've never seen my face before. If you've seen my face a bunch of times, you just haven't subscribed. And you're like, I don't really subscribe to YouTube channels. I'm not that kind of person. Just do it for me. This once. Come on, kid. You see me all the time. Might as well be subscribed. But anyway, I think that's it. If you want to, donate to the Patreon. All it takes is $1 a month, and that'll let you vote on what decks you want to see on the channel. Pretty good for just $1 every 30 days. I guess it's 28 days this month because it's February. But still, just $1 just every month. You'll vote on what decks you want to see. Not bad. But I'm pretty sure that I'm done for this one. I know this shirt choice is weird, but early Krangler was like the only shirt I had in my closet that even sort of had a thief on it at all. And this shirt is actually really important to me. It's signed by Unknown Henson, the guy that plays Early Kyler on Squidbillies. So I don't crack it out too much, but I felt it was appropriate for this one. But in any case, I'm pretty sure that was the only time I've said in any case this whole video. I've been trying to make sure I don't do that over and over, because every time I edit, I'm like, man, this is the 8th time you said in any case. But I think I'm done. I was about to do it just then, but I stopped myself. I think I'm done for this one, so do all the YouTube stuff, and I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind. Here's the Patreon fam.